You've been hearing us talk about imperial yeast for a while now, and that's because we absolutely love the stuff. With 200 billion cells in each pitch-right pouch, we rarely need to make starters these days. While originally based out of Portland, Oregon, imperial yeast has expanded to the East Coast, meaning even more people have access to their incredible lineup of yeast, including popular strains like A07 Flagship, A38 Juice, A09 Pub, and a Brülosophy favorite, L17 Harvest. So good. Whether you brew at home or on the commercial scale, imperial yeast has what you need to make the best beer possible. You can check out all of their available strains and start your planning at imperialyeast.com. Another year in the books as Brülosophy approaches its 11th birthday, which is just a couple months away from now. It's difficult not to look back and notice just how different things are today compared to when we first started. Not just for us, as a business, but for beer and brewing in general. This is the Brülosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and joining me this week to share our thoughts and opinions on all that went down in 2024 is contributor Will Lovell.
It's really interesting looking back on a year because, the older I get, the more things blur together. But, to go back and kind of focus on 2024 and see what's been going on both in my personal life and in the world of brewing and the world of Brülosophy has been a very interesting reflection. And I look forward to reflecting a little bit more on that with you today.
Yeah, and who knows where this is going to go. We've got a rough outline, sort of the way that we do with all Brews Views episodes, where it's just a real, bony outline, and then we fill it in with whatever comes to mind. But before we get into all of that, I just want to get it out there that I am beyond grateful that we've been able to continue doing what we do, which is only possible through the support of our patrons and sponsors. If you enjoy the Brülosophy Podcast, our website, the Brülosophy Show, or anything else that we do, you have those folks to thank for it. Huge cheers to every single one of our patrons, as well as those sponsors who continue to see the value in working with us. We'll be getting into some details we don't usually discuss on the show later in this episode, sharing our unabashed opinions. And just as a reminder, this is a Brews Views episode where we allow ourselves to speak a little bit more candidly than usual, meaning we might use language that some people don't like or share ideas you maybe disagree with. All we ask is that you remember it's not our intention to offend anybody. It's just our point to have an honest conversation in a less filtered way. All right, if you enjoy this show and you want to help us to continue producing it, please consider becoming a patron of Brülosophy, which you can do over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. By making a small monthly pledge, you'll receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique discounts at YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to a monthly live Q&A session with somebody in the brewing world. Our first guest of 2025 is somebody you've all likely come across at some point, host of the awesome craft beer channel on YouTube and author of the new book, The Meaning of Beer, How Our Pursuit of the Perfect Pint Built the World, Johnny Garrett. I had the pleasure of being a guest on an episode of the Craft Beer Channel a few years ago, talking with Johnny about brewing hazy IPA of all things. And he was recently interviewed by Cade on the Brew Lab as well. He's such an awesome dude. As funny and whimsical as he is knowledgeable about brewing and beer, given his book's claim about beer essentially building the world, I've no doubt this is going to be a kick-ass session. To be part of it, be sure to make your pledge of just $3 or more by Friday, January 24th, as Johnny's going to be hanging out with patrons that Saturday, the 25th. All past sessions are stored on our private Patreon and Facebook pages, so patrons can go back and watch them whenever they like. Learn more about all of the rewards we offer for your support and become a patron today over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. Another really easy way to help us out is by using the links found at brülosophy.com/support when you're doing your shopping online. Your experience won't change at all, and we get a little commission for the referral that helps us to cover the costs of running all of this stuff. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and review of this show in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, that'd be awesome too. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who are known for their incredible all-in-one electric brewing systems. I've brewed on both their 120 and 240 volt systems, and I'm telling you, these things are legit, efficient, easy to use with a relatively small footprint. You're not going to be disappointed with one of these units. Plus, the guys behind the company run an awesome YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for Clawhammer Supply. If you're in the market for electric brewing gear or even just reasonably priced kettles and such, make sure to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer at clawhammersupply.com. And don't forget to let them know Brülosophy sent you when you're checking out. That's clawhammersupply.com. Listener Tiago Caldera from Portugal wrote in with some feedback after listening to an older episode of the show. Tiago said, catching up on some older episodes and recently listened to episode 327 on old versus new Cascade hops, and I wanted to share a bit of my experience. First of all, like you, I store all of my hops in the freezer, but I vacuum seal them in their bag. For the last 7 years, I haven't had any problems with the hops I store, except for EKG, which are East Kent Goldings. I recently brewed an overly bitter beer because of some EKG hops that were vacuum sealed in the freezer for about 1 year. Also, back when I was starting to brew, I made a beer that had a weird metallic aftertaste that was due to some EKG hops. Though in those days, I only stored them in the fridge with no vacuum seal. I'd be interested to see a repeat of this experiment using EKG. Now, Will, before we respond to this one, I have to wonder, in Portugal at least, where they're getting their hops from. Are they buying them from Yakima Valley Hops? What are, the bags? Are they the Mylar bags? Do they come in vacuum seal bags or something like that? So those are things we don't know. But what do you have to say to Tiago about this?
Yeah, I am kind of curious, especially, it is a UK variety, so obviously to get to Portugal shouldn't be as far to travel as it would be to get to the US, right?
Right.
And so I'm kind of curious, like how they're storing them at the stores and things. But I'm assuming, again, it should be a cooler climate to ship in than, say, shipping from, the UK to Texas in the middle of summer or something. So I'm curious how they were stored going to the shop. But it is an interesting observation, and I don't honestly use a ton of EKG in my own brewing, so I don't think I have any older bags of EKG hanging around, but that is curious that you have that experience with that hop, and I would be curious to see if other people have had similar experiences that they can share with us.
So a lot of the stuff that he's describing, right, that bitterness, the overly bitter perception of that, the metallic aftertaste thing, I've definitely experienced that stuff in beers that I've brewed as well. But I'm not sure it was because of the hops. We've done similar experiments using different hop varieties. Willamette and Simcoe come to mind. And the results have not been terribly consistent, which I feel is because certain factors were at play. For example, the Simcoe experiment compared fresh, well-stored hops to old hops that were not stored well. So it makes sense that those results were different than the experiment Tiago's referring to. Now, it sounds like Tiago's pretty convinced the issues he experienced with the beers that he brewed were brought on because of these EKG hops. And while that may very well be the case, it could also be something else. I'm kind of the king of equivocalness over here, and I get that can annoy some people. But just personally, I try to refrain from jumping to conclusions when it comes to solving problems, mostly because I don't want to close myself off to other potential issues or causes of those problems, I guess. Anyway, we've logged your suggestion to repeat that experiment with EKG, and we'll likely get to it at some point in the future. I don't know if he's storing those EKG hops in his freezer, whether he's vacuum sealing them or not. I doubt that that's what the issue is, but it may be that it is that what's causing the bitterness and the metallic thing. I really don't know. But interesting observations nonetheless. And like I said, we will add that one to the list. If you have show feedback, you could send it to feedback@brülosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. All right. When we return from this break, our views on 2024.
Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all these shows in Atlanta. Gospel at Atlanta Symphony Hall. Gospel at Atlanta Symphony Hall. And Zach Brown Band at State Farm Arena. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.
Have you ever thought about adding a port to your kettle but held off because you didn't feel like drilling into your gear or sending it off to have someone else do it? From the makers of the world's fastest counterflow chiller, the Exchillerator, comes the Hangover, the easiest way to add extra ports to your kettle as well as countless other options. Mount a faucet to your keg for easy portable pouring. Set up the perfect whirlpool arm. Hold a heating element in place. All of this and so much more without permanently modifying your gear. Manufactured right here in the United States, the Hangover offers brewers too many convenient solutions to list here. So head over to Exchillerator.com today to see what the Hangover can do for you.
Attention sports enthusiasts, keep the adrenaline pumping and elevate your game day with Chumba Casino. It's completely free to play. No purchase necessary. Whether you're cheering from the stands, on the move, or relaxing at home, Chumba Casino brings the thrill of social casino directly to your fingertips. Experience the ultimate social casino adventure with reels of casino-style games, offering hundreds of exciting options to choose from and fresh new releases every week. There's always something new and thrilling to explore. From action-packed social slots and classic blackjack to engaging bingo and solitaire, the fun never stops. Plus, enjoy generous daily login bonuses and a fantastic free welcome bonus to kickstart your social gaming journey. Dive into the excitement. Discover a world where you can play for your chance to redeem some serious prizes and have a blast along the way. Don't miss out. What are you waiting for? Join now and immerse yourself in nonstop fun and adventure with Chumba Casino. Get in on the action today at ChumbaCasino.com and make every day a Chumba day. No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus. TNCs apply.
Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all these shows in Atlanta. Zach Brown Band at State Farm Arena. Zach Brown Band at State Farm Arena. And Zach Brown Band at State Farm Arena. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.
In preparing for this episode, I went back and re-listened to episode 312, which was the Brews Views on 2023 that we dropped at the end of last year. I remember my aunt, who is basically like my mom, telling me when I was 13 that with every year that passes, each subsequent year feels like it goes by faster. And my goodness, has that been true for me? I feel like Jordan and I were just recording that episode just yesterday. And honestly, a lot of what we talked about, back then still sort of applies today, I guess. Of course, some things have changed, like the fact that we're pretty much back to normal living after the shitty COVID ordeal. But sadly, not all things have recovered to their previous glory, and brewing was hit particularly hard by the pandemic. Thankfully, we somehow managed here at Brülosophy to make it through with just minor injuries, so to speak. So what's up with you in your life? What kind of stuff went down in 2024 for you, Will?
So what's interesting is and this kind of goes back to the pandemic too, is I kind of look back at years and where did I travel? And that sounds kind of weird, but we usually do a few family trips or family vacations. And so I kind of look back and be well, where did I travel? Because that kind of helps me delineate what was different about that year. Because otherwise you're waking up and kids are going to school and things can get kind of in a rut. But last year for New Year's, we met some friends in New Roads, Louisiana. And that's kind of how we brought in the new year. Interestingly enough, we're going to meet the same group of friends in San Diego this year. So, New Roads is as quaint and interesting as it is. There's actually a little daiquiri / casino shop down the street, so you can go get your daiquiris and play the slot machines. And it was pretty ghetto, fabulous, and amazing. Highly recommended if you're driving through New Roads. But yeah, so we're not going to have that experience in San Diego, but San Diego is probably going to be a little more upscale, so to speak. We also had a lovely vacation on spring break last year. We went to Hawaii and met with some friends who were military and got to hang out there. So that was lots of fun. We also did a cruise out of Seattle. And so I got to visit your old stomping grounds in Seattle for once and then do an Alaskan cruise out of there. So that was kind of fun. And then some fun little intermingled things going back up to Northeast Texas where I'm from and showing my wife and kids around Caddo Lake and kind of the surreal experience of finding this random sandbar in the middle of nowhere with just a bunch of people swimming at it. And it's just kind of randomly there. And so that was kind of fun. So we had all these great traveling experience for brewing. I would say the one thing that happened earlier in the year that has been very different, interesting, kind of fun is I switched over to glycol this last year. And so I've been using, I guess since about January, February, a glycol chiller in the Delta Firm tanks with all their glycol accessories. And that's pretty cool. I also... I competed a lot more this year, and I actually won a local competition where I got to do a pro-am on a wild barley kitchen and brewery system with my American Amber Ale called Johnny Depp's X. So that was kind of fun too.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, my year. I don't know if it was quite as exciting as yours, but we had a great year. A lot of changes in the brewing headquarters and things. We are actually. I'm sitting in the brand new studio, brand new to us, of course. My family moved into a different home just last week. This is my first real weekend in my new office / studio where we're recording this podcast. I'm quite pleased with it, honestly. But as you know, people who have listened to this show for a while know that neighborhood that I just moved away from, and albeit I'm only 2 miles away from it now. We moved just 2 miles away, but it holds a lot of meaning for me. That's where I met Tim and Jersey. Tim still lives there. Jersey, of course, moved away about 3 years ago. But leaving it was bittersweet. You know, it was great. It did a lot of good for us. We built a family there. I built this business there. And so now we're in this new home again. And thankfully, it's close by. And so, you know, we've been able to see our friends and all of that still. We're still unpacking boxes. But yeah, that's the biggest change in my world so far. We did some traveling over the last year. Most notably, we spent spring break in Costa Rica, which was pretty cool. And I got to try, you know, all of their local beers and some craft beers. We went to 2 craft beer bars while we were down there as well. Absolutely excellent beer. They're actually brew pubs. So they brewed the beer there, and excellent beers being made down in Costa Rica. We were in Jaco, for those wondering, which is, I believe, the Pacific Ocean side. And then we went to Jamaica for our 20-year anniversary, which was a lot of fun. First time going to the Caribbean, and we had an absolute blast. It was just my wife and me for a week. Met some really cool people at the resort who we're still in contact with. That was not a beer vacation. I drank a lot of Red Stripe on that trip, but it was pretty fun. And then now here we are in this new house, and we're recording. So I mentioned it on the latest episode of the Brülosophy show, where we shared our brew year's resolutions, that my goal for 2025 is to build out my brewery again. And it's going to take a little bit of time and work, because I've got a 240 volt brewing system, electric brewing system that, you know, in my house does not currently have 240 volt plugs in the garage. So I've got to get that installed. And then I've got to, like I said, unpack all these boxes and everything that's in the way. So but good to know. It sounds like we both enjoyed our 2024 years with our families and doing all of that stuff. So how are things going with Brülosophy? So this is one of those things that we like to focus on every year. And I know typically we publish these episodes as the last episode of the year. This year we're doing it as the first episode of 2025, only because I'm going on and we're recording it prior to the the publishing of the episode, because I will be on a cruise ship with no access to my phone or service, as far as I know, when this episode drops. So that's why we're doing it this way. And so we're going to talk a little bit about our plans for the future as well. But in 2024, you know, since the start of COVID, we lost over half of our sponsors. That was something I never was, you know, shied away from talking about. I completely understand why that happened, right? The industry was hit so insanely hard. Now, I get that some people just cannot tolerate the fact that businesses pay us to promote them. I don't know what to tell those people. Call it a necessary evil if you must, but these businesses not only provide us with the stuff that we all need to engage in this hobby that we love, but it's because of their support that folks like us are able to do what we're doing today. So I don't feel bad about that. It's just the way these things work. Now, unfortunately, some of those old sponsors aren't around anymore. They had to close up shop due to a lack of revenue, which was ostensibly caused by a significant decrease in people buying stuff from them, an overt indicator of the waning interest in homebrewing. We're going to get back to that point in a bit, but I just want to make sure to be transparent about this stuff and extend our gratitude to those who have helped us build Brülosophy into what it is today.
Oh yeah, I love our sponsors. I love going to our website and seeing Yakima Valley Hops, who I know they're a sponsor, but I was using them well before I was part of Brülosophy, and have really enjoyed their products. And then you see More Beer and Imperial Yeast and all these. I think the big thing is that a lot of the people that we get support from, and a lot of the companies that support us, I really do appreciate the fact that you go out of your way to vet and make sure that they're actually legitimate and pretty decent companies. Because even More Beer, like anytime the glycol chiller I mentioned, I actually had an issue with it, and just their customer service and support and ability to like help you work through problems and replace it if that's what it takes, is just so appreciated. So I really do appreciate the sponsors and that, they actually are, really great businesses to work with if you get a chance.
Well, not only that, they're just great businesses for homebrewers. That's one of the things that we've always been committed to, is vetting the sponsors that we work with, that we partner with to do this thing. And what's been cool is that, here we are approaching year 11, and we've had most of the sponsors, that are currently with us, are sponsors that came on right around the beginning of this thing. And they've really stuck it out with us, which I like to think is a sign of their belief in what we're doing. And they want us to stick around just as much as the people who help us out. Now, thankfully, we have been able to more or less make up for those lost sponsorships. The biggest thing being Patreon. That's how we do it. That's why we talk about it so much. The fact that there are so many people out there, our current patron count is around 1,000 people, which is just crazy to me. But the fact there's that many people who appreciate what we do enough to just throw a few bucks our way each month, it is so insanely humbling and motivating. It makes me want to keep doing this. And you might, misinterpret that as me saying that it's because of the money or whatever. That money goes to pay for all of this stuff. I don't know how else to explain that. What it is it's that sign that people want us to keep doing it. And for whatever, make of that what you will, it is very motivating and encouraging. And that is why we're here. So huge thanks to all of our patrons for being so fucking awesome. We're here because of you and largely for you as well. Now, breaking down some of the different things that we do here, we'll start with the Brülosophy website, our bread and butter. It's what got us off the ground back in early 2014. We have made some changes to our publishing schedule, and I'll admit it was primarily because we needed to work out a way to keep doing what we do, such that it was economical, to put it simply. But nothing significant. I don't even think the changes were big enough for most people to even notice. We get a lot of emails from people complaining about things that we do, or, pointing things out. I haven't received a single email about the changes that we made. So again, that to me is like a sign that we maybe did it all right.
Yeah, it's been interesting because we went from doing like basically an experiment every Monday to now we're kind of doing that every other Monday and intermingling in some short and shotties and brew it yourselves and Hop Chronicles in on those alternating weeks. And so I thought I'm with you. I thought we might get more emails, more nasty grams, more something, or at least just somebody, acknowledging the change. But I feel like from a contributor standpoint, it's kind of made the workload a little more reasonable.
Yeah.
Because before I was blind, couldn't see straight. We were brewing so much beer, collecting so much data, and it kind of got a little bit crazy. But since we've gone to this new format, it's been nice. We actually have a little bit of a instead of like just scrambling to find an article to publish every Monday or Thursday, now our Friday, as it were. Now we're just trying to, we actually are looking out, and we actually have a few articles kind of in the can ready to go. And so that has to make your life easier as well.
You have no idea. The best way to look at it, though, and I think maybe why people didn't quite notice the change, or if they noticed it wasn't that big of a deal, is because we didn't stop publishing on those days. It's that we just moved things around so that the more, I guess, effort intensive tasks were reduced slightly, but we replaced it with things that didn't require as much focus. And so it feels like the content is still out there, and it is. I mean, that's the beauty of the change that we made, I suppose, but it's just different. And that moving it around really did kind of relieve some of the pressure on us. So I'm glad that worked out for us. Now, our stats did take a pretty big hit the year or so after the COVID pandemic. Again, we talked about that last year, and I think the year prior as well. But the hit was in line with pretty much all of the other brewing and beer related outfits out there. But over the last 6 months or so, things have actually started to pick up a bit, which is great to see. I mean, I'm insanely hopeful that this upward trajectory remains. And, we're starting to see it now. This is something we've been talking about for the last 3 or 4 years are we going to get back to that? At least are we going to creep out of this deep lull and see things improve? And just based purely on our stats from the website, it looks like things are starting to either stabilize and maybe even tick up a little bit.
Yeah, I have heard some personalities out there say that they thought, that we might have actually like bottomed out and might be on the mend. And I've been a little bit skeptical, as I always am. But I really, I like hearing that, the website's getting a little bit of an uptick, and it does feel like that maybe, things could turn around. I don't know that we'll ever get back to kind of that crazy level we were, pre-pandemic, but if we could just, recoup just a little bit, like just start going upward trajectory, that would be huge for homebrewing, huge for Brülosophy, and huge for all the people out there that are, still hanging out in this hobby and trying to propel it back upwards.
Well, yeah, and I think, as sentimentalist that I am, the most painful aspect of what happened post-COVID, or I guess during COVID as well, but it was seeing friends of ours. We call them sponsors, but we have real relationships with everybody who supports us on that sponsorship level, and seeing them struggle. I mean, that was insanely hard for someone like me who just wants to see people do well. I really wanted to see all of these businesses flourish, and unfortunately, some of them had to, for their betterment, in fact, had to go under, and it's just sad to see. So hopefully we start to turn that car around and get back on the right track. Now, the absolute biggest change to the website that we made this year is the website itself. A few months ago, I worked with another dude in the industry with much more smarts than me when it comes to web design and such, to completely revamp the website, which was much needed after over a decade with this same old retired theme. We couldn't even do certain updates on our back end because the theme that we were using, which thankfully it was a free theme that I just selected at the start of Brülosophy. Thankfully, it wasn't that popular because I feel like that would have cheapened the way our site looks. But they retired that theme years and years ago. We couldn't do certain updates. There were certain limitations that we had. So we went in, completely revamped everything. Our goal was to keep the branding all the same, so it had a familiar feel to our readers, but we wanted to improve the overall user experience, and I feel like we really did accomplish just that. I'm sure some tweaks are going to be made over the coming months, but for now, again, I'm really pleased with the update, and I hope our readers are as well.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I mean, I know what the old website looked like, but when I go to the new website, I personally, I can see that there's I don't know what you call it, the tiled view where it kind of has the article and they'll kind of like automatically scroll over to a new tile. When I see that, I know it's different, but it does have kind of the same feel. It has kind of the same vibe. And then I love that I can still go to the drop-down menus and go to the different projects and find whatever experiment that I'm looking for. It's especially handy for those of us that have to come up with new ideas or see if it's been done before for Short and Shoddy or Hop Chronicles, to be able to hit those projects tabs. Not that everybody else has that problem, but I tend to have that problem. So I like that those features are still there and that everything is basically still kind of in the same place, as it were. Although it does have a new feel and a new layout and a new look, which is is a little bit nice, a little bit of an update.
Yeah, I think I think people going to the website are probably like, oh, finally, this actually makes sense with the way modern websites are supposed to run. Again, it was just old and dilapidated, and we fixed it up. And I'm very grateful to the team that helped me take care of that, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. So now on to the Brülosophy podcast. I'm not sure why, considering how things are going for beer and brewing, but for whatever reason, this podcast has only continued to do better over the last year, which I like to think is a reflection of the general sentiment toward brewing. I mean, maybe that is a sign of, people getting interested in it again and wanting to stay involved, though, I'm sure for some, it's just something way less meaningful than that. I actually got an email from somebody a couple months ago, Will, who said that they love listening to the Brülosophy podcast tonight because my voice lulls them to sleep. I guess I'm happy to help on that front as well. And I thank those folks for listening too.
My wife does something similar when I travel out of town. She'll find one that I'm on, and then that's how she'll go to sleep. So it's okay. I know the feeling. I'm not sure how
I feel about that, Will. That means my voice is lulling her to sleep as well.
It's a lovely lullaby. There's at least 2 episodes of the Brülosophy podcast. It's just nothing but me blathering on about whatever for Patreon stuff. So, maybe she's listening to those, but she's like, oh yeah, if I miss you and feel lonely at night, I'll just turn on the podcast. I can listen to you talk, and then I'll put put me to sleep. I'm like, well, I'm so glad that we have such riveting material for you, my dear. So, but that's pretty great stuff. But I think our podcast is awesome. I think we do a really good job trying to put out amazing content every week, and that's a lot of bias there. But we get feedback to that effect as well. So it's pretty amazing to get such great and positive feedback about this podcast to people that I'm not married to.
Or that aren't co-hosting it with you, right? Because I can pat your back all day long on your co-hosting of the show. No, it's this podcast is so much fun. It takes a lot of work. We talked about this last week when Cade co-hosted with me that experiment episode, and it's just true. The fact of the matter is, we're putting together show notes. That takes a couple of hours. We're recording, which we've got to organize, me and a co-host on each episode. And then after that, there's all of the editing, the uploading, the sharing, all of that stuff takes a lot of time, way more than I expected at the beginning of this, but it has been more than worth it. It's so much fun. Being able to have this outlet, from just the website in the early days of the Brülosophy, it's just, I'm so glad I took the advice of all the people who are recommending we make the podcast, because it's just a ton of fun. Now, we have been talking about the possibility of integrating a couple more series into the show, like the Hop Chronicles and even Brew It Yourself. But our hang up has been organizing those episodes in a way that gets us to our standard kind of average length of about an hour, while offering listeners something entertaining and interesting that they can also learn something from. Now, I don't know. Let us know what you guys think. Would you be cool with potentially shorter episodes where we take a deep dive into like a single specific hop variety, or into, interesting recipes that we've brewed with weird tweaks and such? That's what the Hop Chronicles and Brew It Yourself are. And, the reason I bring this up is because we have gotten encouragement from a few people out there who would really love for us to at least give that a shot, to hear to hear us talk about those things, because it does feel like they're kind of just living over on the website, brülosophy.com, and then they don't do anything from there. And us talking about it kind of can wrap things up a little bit. I don't know. I'd be open to hearing your guys' words about that. What are your thoughts on that, Will?
So the Hop Chronicles, it seems interesting, but to talk about the lineage of a certain hop, you can only talk about lineage of hops for so long. It's literally like a five minutes of a show, maybe. And if you go that long, maybe you've lost all your listeners. But the Hop Chronicles to me are always your graphs that you have there, like showing kind of, what people were perceiving. And so it's kind of, a little difficult to relay that visual over airwaves, basically, so and through voice. And so I would be curious. I think it's doable. I think maybe especially now that we have the pale lager and the pale ale recipe series, maybe if you've got some that you've done both on, that way you could talk about how people perceived it in the pale lager versus the pale ale at the end, to give you a little bow to tidy up on it. That might be something interesting to explore, and at least toss around as an idea.
Yeah, so I've actually, this is how big of a nerd I am. I actually sort of did a mental timing of what a Hop Chronicles episode would look like. And so we'd have our normal segment one where it's all the introductory stuff that a few people complain about, but it's just the business side of things. And then for the second segment, like where we're at right now, right? We would focus more on the objective stuff. We'd go over some of the history of the hop variety, where it was grown, who grew it originally, if it's public or not, all of the terpenes and such, and what we might expect from that. Some of the commonly accepted descriptors that are associated with that hop variety. And then in the final segment, we would just go over all of our data that we collected on that for the Hop Chronicles. I think that could get us to between 45 and 60 minutes. When I did my little mental timing, I was consistently... I wrote out show notes for 3 different hop varieties, Will. This is how dorky I am. And I think it could get us there. I'm not convinced of that. And my bigger concern is whether our listeners are interested in that. It just feels so deep, like maybe it's not that entertaining. That could just be my own insecurity talking. And that's why we're asking for your guys' feedback. If you want to see or hear, I suppose, hear us talk about specific hop varieties like that, let us know. It's something I'd be willing to work on for 2025. It won't happen right away, but it may very well happen in the future if enough people want us to do that. So,
well, if you need a blowhard to pilot an episode with you, you let me know. I can ramble on about Lord knows what for Lord knows what amount of time. So just let me know, and we can ramble on about hop lineage and soil pH and whatever it is people want to hear about.
All I want is to listen to you talk about soil pH for an hour.
Well, I'll have you know that I live in an area where it's not very conducive to growing hops, because the soil pH is, it's quite high. So anyways, moving on. I don't want to bore myself.
Look, you're already bored with yourself, and we haven't even done the episode yet. Come on. All right. Final point for this segment here. We're going to talk about the Brew Lab. And, this was an idea that Cade presented to me way back in May of 2020. I mean, in the thick of the COVID pandemic, we had it was two months into it where everyone was really freaking out and we didn't know what was going on. I happened to have been camping. That was a very popular thing during the COVID things for the COVID times for us, was to get away from the city and just get out into the woods and take a load off. Well, I was away camping. Cade sends me this email, and when I camp, I'd say more than 50% of the time I'm completely off the grid, inaccessible. You know this, Will. So I come back down the hill and my phone starts blowing up, and one of the hundreds of emails that I had was from Cade proposing this idea for a show where he would interview brewing scientists or scientists who have done experiments in beer and brewing, and share that with the masses. And he wanted this to be a new show on the Brülosophy podcast network. And, I'm sitting there and I'm reading through this going, this sounds like a great idea. And, I responded to him, and by February of 2021, we dropped the first episode. Cade's dedication was, it blows my mind how hard he hit it to make that show what it was. And he interviewed so many amazingly smart people over the last 4 years. I guess 3 years, three and a half, 4-ish. Yeah, 4 years. It's just an amazing feat. And unfortunately, it does have to come to an end. The final episode dropped end of the last week of December. And it was an amazing episode with John Bryce and Vinny Chilurzo, as well, of course, as Jordan Folks, co-host of the Applying the Science episodes. Awesome show. We're so proud of what Cade created, but we're also insanely happy for him to be focusing more on earning his PhD in brewing science. He's still going to be involved with Brülosophy. He's actually quite excited to have more time to be able to co-host this show with me now and to get back to doing some of the stuff for the website again. But again, just a lot of work goes into having to do this and to produce a podcast that people actually want to listen to. And I feel like Cade accomplished that goal.
So what I think is amazing is I'm not going to remember the exact episode, but there was an episode where he had this guy on and he'd found this novel component of a hop, and I'm not going to remember the exact scientific name. And I remember listening to this gentleman talk for these are pretty long episodes, 30 minutes, an hour, about, this novel thing that he found and kind of the implications and the fact that there was no real current, applicable use for it as of right now. And I'm like, that's totally science in a nutshell. They went out, they found this thing, it's new, it's crazy, there's no real use for it yet, but maybe in the future somebody will find a use for whatever thing that they found inside of the hop genome. And you're like, that's pretty rad. And so I thought it was kind of cool that he had a whole lab series where, yes, a lot of it was applicable. That's why Jordan and him did the Applying the Sciences, but a few of them were just so out there and new and interesting that the actual application hadn't caught up with the science yet, and the fact that we had a space for that in the Brülosophy sphere was pretty amazing. And so bravo to Cade. Some of my favorite episodes were the ones where you get to the end of it, you're like, oh, this is just science in a nutshell. We found this thing, we have no use for it, but maybe somebody will find one someday. And that's science in a nutshell.
I love it so much. For the last since February of 2021, every Monday morning I was editing the Brülosophy podcast, editing the Brew Lab. It just became a part of my Monday routine, and it would take me through most of the day. I'd drop off my kids at school, do all of the editing, and by the time I got done, it was almost time to go pick the kids up. And it's going to be interesting. There's going to be this little bit of a vacuum there. I'm not complaining about less work, don't get me wrong, and we do have some ideas, to not necessarily replace the Brew Lab. We are not coming out with another podcast, at least immediately, but some ideas to replace that content and to keep people interested. But yeah, it's bittersweet because we love the Brew Lab, we love Cade, and I'm so glad that he's going to be sticking around to spend time with us, and so that you all get to hear his wonderful voice, of course, more often. And also looking forward to the little bit of a break I get on Mondays now. So, well, we've got to get to a quick break. When we come back, more opinions on stuff from the year 2024.
Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all these shows in Atlanta. Zach Brown Band at State Farm Arena. Zach Brown Band at State Farm Arena. And Gospel at Atlanta Symphony Hall. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.
There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today.
Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all these shows in Atlanta. Gospel at Atlanta Symphony Hall. Gospel at Atlanta Symphony Hall. And Gospel at Atlanta Symphony Hall. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.
As every brewer knows, the best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world, carrying everything from classics like Cascade to modern favorites like Galaxy and Mosaic, as well as other ingredients and gear. Yakima Valley Hops has it all. And don't forget to check out their new podcast, The Late Edition, where the YVH crew goes into depth on our favorite plant with industry experts. Head over to YakimaValleyHops.com now to see all they have to offer and subscribe to The Late Edition wherever it is you listen to podcasts. I've always been one to question shit and test it out, so when my brewing partner left town back in 2012, I had to find something to keep me interested, and experimentation was that thing. I always enjoyed writing as well, so within a year or so of my buddy leaving, I began documenting all of the weird experimental stuff I was doing, and in February of 2014, I started the Brülosophy website. Unexpectedly, things grew very quickly from there. We got our first contributors in May of that year. We started the Brülosophy podcast in early 2017. The Brew Lab came a few years after that. And at the start of 2023, we dropped the first episode of the Brülosophy Show, hosted by Martin Keene, who I convinced to drop his prior gig, the Homebrew Challenge, in order to run our YouTube channel. And what a trip it has been. The Brülosophy Show has currently over 27,000 subscribers, with each new video yielding thousands and thousands of views within the first few days of us dropping it. And it's just been such a really cool thing to see Martin do. Now, I know, again, like what we said about the Brew Lab, same thing that I've experienced with the Brülosophy podcast and the website. It is a ton of work, but what an amazing thing he's created over there.
Oh, I love what Martin's doing. I love everything from, when he features people like me, or even the cheapskate brewer himself, Alex Shanks-Abel, to get on there. And I love it when he gets the contributors on there sharing their experiences. I love it that he gets to have like really cool guests like John Palmer on there frequently.
Yeah.
I love that we still get to see Norm on there tasting beers from time to time, and occasionally the dapper Will Allwert that floats around near his hometown as well. So I really like what Martin's doing with that. He's been a great addition to Brülosophy as far as the experiments and the Hop Chronicles and all those kind of short and shoddy series and all the things that he's been brewing, but also just the way that he goes to it. And then the really weird oddity that somehow the people reading the articles and listening to the podcasts and watching the show, like, I don't know that they're all the 100% same demographic. I think there's a fair amount of overlap, but the fact that like people will watch the show and then be surprised that there's an article about what we just talked about is very fascinating to me. So it's very interesting, the overlap or lack thereof in some cases.
That cracks me up that you brought that up, dude. When Martin and I were first planning things out for the show, what I told him was, hey, don't worry about having to brew every week like you did with the Homebrew Challenge, because he's thinking, oh, we're just going to do, these experiments and Hop Chronicles and all that. I'm going to be brewing all the time again. And he just doesn't have the time for that. Nobody does, right? What I said was just go plop some old, take some old experiments that we did, talk about them on the show. And he's like, well, I mean, people have already read that. It's going to be redundant. And I was like, here's the thing that we found with the podcast. The people who listen, a good chunk of the people who listen to this podcast aren't religiously reading every article that we put on the website, and vice versa. And I have a feeling it's going to be the same for the Brülosophy show, that the people who, prefer ingesting their brewing content from YouTube aren't necessarily the same people who prefer listening to podcasts, who aren't necessarily the same people who prefer reading about it on a website. And boy, has that seemed to become, to be true. People, like you said, I've seen so many comments where somebody's like, oh, it'd be cool if you guys actually wrote an article on this. And I go back in a 4-year-old article and I plop it into the comments and people are like, oh man, cool. I didn't know you guys were doing this for that long. I mean, I guess that's part of the reason we want to spread our wings, and do as many of these, I guess, areas of content as possible, the web, the pod, and the YouTubes. It's been really cool.
And I think our presence in the BrewTube sphere, as it were, is really actually kind of nice, because I don't think there's too many other BrewTubers out there doing at least exactly what Brülosophy does with the blind triangle perception testing and some of the experimentation that we're doing. And so I do think it's a great way to absorb that content. I know for me personally, I don't normally watch like every week when an episode drops. I usually build up like 3 or 4 of them and then get some free time and just kind of binge it for about half an hour, and then move on to something else. But I think it's cool that people do actually subscribe and save, because Martin will never say that out loud, so I'll say it for him. But the people that actually subscribe and to the links and like and subscribe, that's it. That's the term, like and subscribe, not subscribe and save. That's Amazon. Sorry, but like and subscribe. That's the term. No need to clicker that. I'll own all those poor wordings there. But yeah, so I love that he won't say like and subscribe, but I'll totally tell people to. That I think there's a fair amount of people that get on there every week just to see what he's cooked up. And Lord knows that I'm one of them, because I think it's really cool to have people on there like John Palmer, all the special guests. Cade's been on it. I know you've been on it. Jordan's been on it. Alex been on it. Pretty much the whole crew. Maybe we need to get Steve on there doing something. But he'll have a spruce tip episode for Steve.
I'm
Martin.
sure.
Can you do that, please? Martin, spruce tips for Steve. Get on that.
Spruce tip Steve. That's what we should start calling him. Steve really does do some crazy stuff with beer, and we love him for it. It's so cool. But on the point that you were making, with all of this stuff that Martin's been doing, integrating, other contributors, we've got a whole bunch of fun stuff planned for the coming year. I don't want to spill the beans too much, mostly because if one of the ideas ends up not working out, I don't want people to, be expecting something that doesn't come. But to put it generally, there's going to be a lot more contributor, cameos, if you will. There's going to be patrons getting involved, people who support us over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. He's going to get the Brew Club members more involved. We've been talking about a fun idea where we basically take our Brews Views series, which that's what this episode is. This episode's a light version of Brews Views, but I guess we're sharing some views on the past year or so. But we're going to take this, and instead of having 2 dudes blow hard about it for an hour, it's going to be multiple people, whether contributors or brew club members or patrons, sharing their opinion on a specific topic in very, very short form, right? The thing with YouTube, at least the Brülosophy show, is that episodes average anywhere between about 9 and 15 minutes. And that is a massively shorter than what we do here on the podcast, where we aim for about an hour. So we, in tossing around ideas about how can we add more content content that isn't necessarily brewing related. And we're very open about that. The brewing piece of it is what takes so much work. We're going to do that stuff, but we want to still provide weekly content as well. And that's why we're coming up with these new ideas. And I'm excited for it. We're also going to be doing some more long form Q&A stuff, but really it's just us sharing old Patreon videos, the Q&As that we talk about at the top of the show every single week, sharing some of the older ones so that you guys all out there can get some knowledge from these folks who have been so gracious with their time and sitting and taking questions from our patrons. So all kinds of new ideas. There's more than just that, but we're going to move on from the Brülosophy show. But before we do, please go subscribe to it. It really is an amazing resource, I feel, for not just brewing, learning stuff, right? The brewing knowledge, what you can get from that. It's also entertaining. Martin is a great host. And again, he's just doing a killer job over there. So Will, I'm going to hand over the mic, as it were, to you to talk a little bit about what happened with the Brew Club over the last year.
So the Brew Club, so again, Brews Views, and so I'll label them as a great team, is my humble opinion. We have Alex, Haven, Trevor, David, Frank, Havo, and myself that are all kind of heading that thing up. We have, membership, which I believe, similar to what you've been noticed, like especially over the last month or so, we've had a pretty good uptick of people asking to join kind of Discord and Facebook. It kind of flattened out for a while, but here over the last couple of months, things have kind of had a little bit of an uptick. So I don't know if that's due to some local expressions kind of falling out and people needing a new outlet, or my hope is that people are just already knee deep in this hobby and are looking for a new outlet just so they have more places to consume info. But we have had kind of an uptick. But in 2024, the year that was, this was our first year doing the Brew Club competition circuit. So we actually had Trevor and Haven put together a competition circuit. I believe it was either 9 or 10 competitions. And they had fun Brew Club multipliers. Like if you submitted an average brew, you'd get more points if you got a gold medal with that versus just a normal beer. So those are kind of fun little Brew Club things. The prize packages were pretty awesome. Like the last I looked, they were, the prize packages that went out to people were like $600+ worth of prizes going to the winner. And then I think we did prizes all the way down to like 4th or 5th place. It was pretty awesome. And for the first year, congratulations to Ross Stewart, who finished first. And he also finished 4th in the MHP Circuit of the Americas. So obviously Ross is a pretty accomplished, pretty amazing brewer.
That's awesome.
And then just to give shout out to Doug Walker, got 2nd, and Scott Gordon finished 3rd. So congrats to all of them. Little humble brag, I managed to finish 10th, but I really only competed in like 2 of the 9 or 10 competitions. That's its own feat in and of itself. So go me, patting myself on the back.
Congratulations, Will.
Putting in minimum effort to get a top 10. Way to go, me. We launched a merch store earlier this year. So we actually have a kind of a Squarespace site where you can get some kind of custom Brew Club merch. It's pretty awesome. I've got at least 2 or 3 of the t-shirts sitting in my closet. And I got a cool hat, and there's some other fun kind of hoodies and things that you can buy that are Brew Club branded. So that's pretty fun. And then, still doing our average brew series. This year, Q1, I believe, was a Kentucky Common that you guys reviewed. Q2 is a Belgian single that you guys reviewed. Q3 was a Fest beer. And then I think the Q4 average brew that you guys should be recording probably early next year is going to be an American Amber Ale. So that's always fun. Haven also did for Halloween, he did a Frankenbrew where he just had like random yeast sitting around. And so he like actually took like, sanitized vials and put the dry yeast in there so that he could ship it to people and they wouldn't know what yeast they had. So they had to brew a beer not knowing what yeast strain they were using. And he sent different yeast strains to different people. So some people had like Saison, some people had like weird Belgian and wheat beer strains. It was kind of a fascinating thing. Dick Wallace, he made some kind of amber lager, amber ale kind of malt bill, but it had like this strange like wit beer strain to go with it. So it was very, very fascinating abomination to drink, true to Frankenbrew style. And then, we still did trivia nights on our Discord server where you can go in and participate in trivia. And sometimes there's prizes associated with that. And sometimes there's just bragging rights, but that's always fun. And then the most recent thing we do in December, which was our December meeting, is we do kind of our own little brew Santa, which is, I call it a semi-secret Santa, where I will assign you somebody usually halfway across the country or further. That way that you can have a little bit of, geographically disparate people. And so, you get a whole bunch of brew club members shipping beer to each other all across the U.S. It's pretty awesome.
I love it, dude. It's so cool. And look, before I share my opinions on the brew club and all it's done for Brülosophy, there's no good excuse for not joining this. It's free. And if you hate Facebook, which is completely understandable, you don't have to use it. There's the Discord thing as well. Now, I'm old. I've tried using Discord a while ago. I can't quite figure it out. But I'm a member. I just don't use it very often. I can understand Facebook at least. But judging by the number we base membership on, at least in part, the number of folks who are in the Brew Club Facebook group. And right now that's at 3,800, give or take, which is pretty phenomenal. That's a pretty big brew club, if you ask me.
So the Facebook group is really huge. I think there's a lot of people on there. It's a really impressive number. I think probably the more active members, like, are more represented in the Discord channel. And that gives us a closer of like who's actually being really active, because our Discord is very active.
Yeah.
And that's over 300 now.
Damn, dude.
So we're doing some really cool things. And again, there's some people on Facebook that aren't on Discord and vice versa. If you want the link to Discord and you just don't want to go through the Facebook page or whatever, just shoot me an email, will@brülosophy.com. I'll send you a link, no problem. And we'll hook you up. And then we actually have gotten to do some fun things like partner with Martin on the Brülosophy show. So we send in average views for the podcast and the beer reviews there. And that's a pretty cool feature. But we also get on the Brülosophy show from time to time and share opinions. I think we did what's the brewing fails, homebrew fails.
Oh yeah.
So we had several people get on that one and talk about, their biggest homebrew fails, on there. And so that's a pretty good way to, if you want to just be a part of it or be featured in it, or if you don't want to, that's fine too. Nobody's going to make you, appear on YouTube. That's for sure.
You must go on YouTube, put your face on camera. No, it's been really, really cool to watch the Brew Club grow. And, something that perhaps, some of our listeners may not be aware of, over the last 5 years or so, I believe all of our new contributors, with the exception of Martin, like I said, I kind of headhunted him, pulled him over from his own gig to join Brülosophy, and I'm so grateful that he chose to do that. But almost all other contributors were from the Brew Club, not the other way around, right? So you've got Cade, who came over from the Brew Club, and look what he's done, right, with the Brew Lab. You got Alex came over from the Brew Club. So it really is almost, in a weird way, it's like an incubator for Brülosophy contributors. And I was thinking about why that is, and it just makes sense, right? That the people who are so dedicated, not just to homebrewing, but homebrewing in the way that we find entertaining or infotaining, those are the folks that are going to find the Brew Club appealing as well. And so a lot of what we do at Brülosophy influences what goes on with the Brew Club. And you mentioned the merch store. That's going to be the last thing that I hit on when it comes to specifically Brülosophy stuff before we just start talking about beer and brewing in general here. I actually got an email from Trevor, he's also a leadership member of the Brew Club. And I believe he's the one who built the merch store. Is that correct?
That is correct. Trevor did a lot of back-breaking work on that, and we just ride on his coattails. It's fine.
Yeah, awesome dude. He has offered to help build the Brülosophy merch store, and as I mentioned earlier, I just moved, so Trevor, he's very well aware that I'm not going to respond to his email too soon, but I'm hoping to get back to it when I'm home from my trip for New Year's, and yeah, there may very well be an actual merch store with Brülosophy stuff in the near future. And so just an amazing group of people, both on the leadership team and as members, who are doing a lot to keep homebrewing alive and active. And I love that. I love that Brülosophy is associated with a club, or I guess that the club is affiliated with Brülosophy that does such cool things. So, all right, let's move away from talking about us and patting our own backs over 2024 and focus a little bit more just on beer and brewing in general. What kind of things did you observe or notice, or I guess experience over the last year in craft beer in general?
So I'll start with the sad thing. There are a lot of really great breweries out there that in the last year have still been closing doors, and it's just really there's been some here in San Antonio that have, hits close to home when they're in their backyard, right? And there's been some other ones nationally that have closed. And it really hurts to see these people that have put in so much time and energy and effort and love into these places to try to make them just great places for you to come and hang out and have a beer, go under. And so that's been a trend that unfortunately has still been happening. Some things, like I know we have a brewery here that they haven't gone under, but they did, stop distribution. They're basically only in their tap rooms now. And so I've seen some breweries take that kind of mentality of, well, we're not making that much money off distribution, so let's just cut that out. And so I've seen a lot of like kind of still maybe a shrinking trend in some ways of the craft beer scene. Hopefully we don't have to fall too much further and the guys that are around can still survive. But that's been kind of the big bummer here this last year. But hopefully the bleeding can stop soon. But on a brighter note, I've definitely seen the trend of like kind of the hoppy lager West Coast pills kind of still taking off and moving onward and upward. I've seen craft lager still continuing to gain growth and traction. Hazy IPA does not seem to be going anywhere. It seems to be firmly planting itself as still a top seller out there, and which is fine. Now that we have these craft lagers to kind of come in and kind of balance it all out, I think we had a little more harmony here, and so I think that's kind of a good thing.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing. I remember, what's 2016, 2017 when hazy IPA wasn't even called that. Actually, people would call it a hazy IPA. It was more descriptive in nature as opposed to being a formal name. But we were talking about it as being this thing that was going to fade away, and it certainly has not. I mean, it is. I have a feeling it's going to stick around forever, just like, American IPA or pale ale. It's become a thing, and I'm glad that drinkers out there have that available to them if that's what they enjoy. But I'm seeing the same things you are. I mean, in a weird way, as heartbreaking as it is to see good people have to close their doors for good because their business just can't sustain itself. This is kind of corrective is the way that I look at it. And you use the term, maybe we can stop the bleeding. I feel like we're doing a decent job of stopping it right now at this point. Certainly, we were hemorrhaging 2 years ago, and things seem to have slowed down on that front a little bit. I've still, I'm hearing from folks who are having to deal with, having to close their breweries down and whatnot. For me, the more painful piece of it is again, personally painful. What I'm seeing is in order for these breweries that are still around to stay around, they've had to raise prices. And I know that, imports and all of that, the prices went up on aluminum and all the things that it takes to distribute beer. My God, I just went and got a 12-pack of a mix pack of Drake's beer, and it cost me $24 at the local grocery store. I mean, that for a 12-pack, it's $2 a can. I get it. I spent it because I want to support the industry, and I do that on a weekly basis at the very least. But my goodness, that is going to be a barrier for a lot of people to get into craft beer, right? When you can go buy, at the same time that I bought that $24, no joke, 12-pack, I spent $23 on a 30-pack of Miller Lite. So to me, it's like, ooh, how are we going to fix that? Because right now, if there's somebody who's not into craft beer, but maybe could be into it, are they going to look away from the 30-pack for $23 to spend $1 more and get, a third less beer? That's a struggle,
I think that kind of piggybacks on the distribution topic too. I think there still are going to be a lot of craft breweries out there, or pro breweries out there that are going to still do distribution. They're kind of designed for that model. Real Ale and Shiner come to mind if you want to consider those craft. They're kind of big. I think Real Ale definitely is. Shiner may be on the fence about whether they call it craft or not. But they're both great breweries and both are set up for distribution. But I think some of the smaller guys that were starting to put their toes in the water of distribution, they may be pulling out all that just because, again, by the time you sell it off through the distributorships, especially here in Texas, the amount of money you're making on a single beer is so small, even with the raised prices. And so I think the way it is I love my local breweries, Roadmap, Wild Barley, some of those guys where I can just go in, buy a pint of beer there at the bar and then just hang out. And those are kind of my go-to spots. Long Tab's another spot here in town that I just love to go in, see the people, live the experience, have a few beers, and then go home. And so I think that's a pretty solid business model, as long as you can have either food or atmosphere or something to get people through the door.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Another thing on the craft beer front, and this is kind of quasi-related. I think I shared with the crew this morning an article that I read about Kirkland Signature. So Costco beer is, remember when they had Kirkland Light and it was just an absolute flop? I tried it. I thought it was awful, which apparently was a fairly common opinion about that beer. Well, they're going to be releasing it again, except this time, at least in certain parts of the US, maybe the entire country, I don't know, it's going to be brewed by Deschutes. How awesome is that? I can't wait for that.
Well, I mean, it makes maybe a little bit of sense to have somebody like Deschutes, because they're owned by, who are they owned by these days?
Deschutes, I thought they were still self-owned, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Are they still self-owned? Because if they are, that's still even radder. But that's kind of cool that they would go on, because mostly I associate Kirkland and Costco branded things as being, pretty good quality.
Yeah.
And if they can go partner with a quality brewery with a quality name out there, then I think that kind of goes on to kind of reinforce that.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears and move into homebrewing and our, views of things over the last year. It's interesting to me. I feel like, and this is just my own bias, but I feel like we, especially you and me, Will, because we you've co-host a lot, but we spend a lot of time talking about the issues in homebrewing and in terms of people leaving the hobby and what we can do to attract new homebrewers and all of that. And we still get questions on a weekly basis. I will get Brewing A questions where people are asking us to address it again. And I don't know if those people missed the prior episodes where we talked about it, or maybe we're just not talking about it as much as I feel like we are. So we're going to get into a little bit. We could spend a whole episode on it just as we have before, but maybe the top 2 or 3 things you think we can do to attract people to this hobby and keep them coming. My number one, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I feel like we need to stop isolating people. And by that, every time you make fun of somebody for drinking a Coors Light, Miller Lite, or Bud Light, those people probably, are more than likely, than people who you're not making fun of. Those folks are likely to look at you and be like, God, this hoity-toity elitist homebrewer who thinks they are, the bee's knees when it comes to beer. That's an annoying thing. And if you think it's cool to act like that and to be all high and mighty because you make your own beer, or you drink a beer that somebody else crafted for you and it's not made by Budweiser, Miller, or Coors, that's not cool. It's a dumb look. That's my opinion. This is Brews Views. But if we stop doing that and we open our arms and we're more welcoming, it's my opinion that part of the reason that we're seeing issues with the Brewers Association and the AHA is because they encouraged that divisive way of being, that let's just shit on big beer and that'll bring people to us. No, I don't think that's what it's doing these days.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you that the future homebrewer is probably somebody that's already a beer drinker, right? And a lot of people that are already drinking beer, you would think craft beer would be the obvious ones, but who are the people that are going to get into craft beer? Obviously people that are already drinking macro lager and some of those beers because they're already in the industry. But I'm with you. I think we need to kind of break down some of these perceptions and barriers. I can't tell you how many people that I talk to and I'm trying to get survey data or whatever. It's like, well, I don't drink beer. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, I just don't like the way it tastes. And I'm like, well, what kind of beer have you had? And inevitably it's either some, IPA or some, macro lager. And the reality is they may, if they would just try like something very interesting, like a Belgian dark strong or something along those lines, you can at least open up avenues to say, hey, beer can taste like something different than what you can expect as well. And so I also think we had a very interesting comment a couple of weeks ago where somebody was talking about doing things more digitally and leveraging more of the digital age. And I think the more we can kind of leverage platforms like YouTube and some of these more digital platforms, Instagram, things like that, that's probably where you're going to reach more young people anyways, more so than you're going to reach them doing it the same way that we've always done it.
Right.
With just kind of websites. Local homebrew shops are struggling. That's kind of just been the nature of things. But I think part of the reason they are struggling is because we're so used to and accustomed to online brewing. And it's the same reason that I think some my local club is doing really well actually, but some local clubs might be struggling too, is just trying to acclimate to that digital world that's out there, and how do you be inclusive in both this digital and in-person segment of population.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up, because one of the notes that I have is sitting in front of me right now is that we need to acknowledge and accept that we are living in different times. As much as it sucks to see these shops and such close, right? As much as it sucks to see in-person homebrew clubs lose membership, at some point we have to accept that that is a function of the times that we're living in. People prefer shopping online. People prefer engaging with other people at 2:00 in the morning on their iPhone. I mean, that's just the days that we are living in. And for us to continue fighting that, I think it's a losing fight. And so to be open to embracing modern technology and using that to further this hobby and to grow it, as opposed to shrink it because of our unwillingness to adapt, I think is key. And my hope is that, I mean, we operate, Brülosophy at least operates in that digital realm. We are, a website that's digital. We've got a podcast and we got a YouTube show. All of that stuff is digital. So we have that going for us. But I feel like, we were talking about the Brew Club a little bit ago. That is a digital club. That is an online club where people can engage any hour of the day, whenever they like, however they like. And I think that is a very appealing thing for a lot of people these days. That's not to poo-poo in-person club meetings or, stuff like that, the in-person live stuff. I'm a big fan of all that stuff, but we have to at least acknowledge that things are changing and stop trying, pull our feet out of the mud, as it were. So that's my thoughts on that. I also think we need to make sure that those who are still brewing have what they want and need to keep them in it. That's a big motivator for us, is that I like to view Brülosophy as providing homebrewers and even professional brewers, as much as others, some people might not want to believe that, with not just entertainment, but some information, some ideas to maybe spark a unique idea for them to go and brew a different beer or to try something new that might end up working for them. So those are kind of my ideas when it comes to homebrewing in general.
Yeah. And I don't know. I listened to something recently and it kind of struck me that we have these kind of old school keepers of the knowledge. Yeah. And, the homebrew clubs and the homebrew shops are always the traditional kind of keepers of the knowledge, right? Because we didn't have, 10, 15 years ago, we didn't have the online presence that we have today with everything. And, and I've heard some people poo-poo on the more modern, like YouTube, this and that. But the reality is we're going to have to realize that these places are no longer just valuable because they're keepers of the knowledge. That knowledge is now out there everywhere, and you can get it 100 different ways in both written, video, and audible formats, not to reference the Audible service, but to reference like listening to things audibly, just to clarify. But so you have all these formats out there. And so we really need to like kind of just say, hey, there is like nothing sacred. There is no more just keepers of the knowledge. We have something much broader, much wider out there. And we just need to kind of really learn to embrace it as people and see what value we can still bring from these local groups, because you're not going to get people to taste your beer on the Discord channel for the brew club. Like that's just not it unless they live in your town. Right. So you kind of need a local expression of something to get together and have people taste and honestly give feedback on your beer if that's what you're into. And it's way cheaper to have just a local homebrew club than it is to sit to competitions for that. So, and probably more productive, honestly. But that's also an opinion that's going to get some flack. So I would say, these keepers of the knowledge, you just need to kind of be a little bit looser with that kind of idea, because let's face it, that's not where people are going for their knowledge anymore. And so what value we need to re-explain the value of these local expressions like homebrew clubs and brew shops, so that we can really, if we want to keep those things around, because if we just use the same old, they've always been valuable to me, so they should be valuable to everybody else. If we keep using that logic, it's eventually going to, make us fall flat on our faces, and they're just going to go away.
Exactly. And that's the point that I'm trying to make, right? It's not to diss the people who I feel or who have made very clear to me that they hate the fact that, brew clubs are shifting to online and yada, yada. So it goes, man. I don't know what to tell you. I've always been one to have opinions about specific things like that, but I'm open to adapting, right? And trying to understand why it is that certain people find certain things appealing, and then utilizing that to keep those folks happy. If you're just going to sit around and complain about the way things used to be and the fact that they're not like that today, I don't know what to tell you. That you gotta change with the times, and that's what's happening here. And I feel like by focusing more on what is modern, I don't want to keep saying digital, because I feel like even that's too old at this point. But the modern approaches to sharing this type of stuff, I like what you said about the keepers of the knowledge. And you think about, we're going to talk about some of the stuff with the AHA and the BA here to wrap up the show. But you think about the National Homebrewers Conference, aka the Homebrew Con, and part of how it started to lose its shine for me is that every time I'd go, the only thing to do during the day is to besides go to the expo, is go to talks, go to lectures. First off, I had more than enough lectures throughout my college education. Grad school was all lectures, and I don't need that. Secondly, all of that information, every single one, I gave talks at HomebrewCon, other Brülosophy contributors gave talks. We all gave talks about stuff that's already existing out there on the internet. And most of the people that I'm friends with who have given talks at those, it's cool to go see them, live. Usually it's a bunch of hungover people trying to wake up so that they get something out of it or whatever. But, I don't know if that format is going to be very appealing to a bunch of people these days. And that's part of the change that I'm talking about, is we've got to come up with things that are fresh and new to attract more people to it, to make people want to do whatever it is that we're doing. So, all right, I want to finish this show by addressing the whole BA, AHA, HomebrewCon thing, only because we talked about it towards the beginning of the year. We get questions about it all the time. I get so many emails about this, asking what our thoughts are, if we've changed, if I've heard anything from them. So I think I mentioned this recently on the show. About a month and a half ago, I hopped on a call with Julia Hertz. She's a great person who I really do believe is trying to do the best she can for a fledgling organization that I don't think is doing what it can to support homebrewers. And I don't think that's Julia's fault. I never intended to spin it that way. If it came across that way, I do apologize. What I heard after we dropped those episodes, boy, did I get a lot of feedback from others in the industry after that. 100% of them, by the way, who agreed with what we were saying, and a lot of them didn't want their names associated with it. One of the bigger things that I heard was that the issue with the Brewers Association and the impact that it was having on the AHA was the CEO at the time did not see the value in supporting homebrewers. Had thrown around the idea of just killing off the AHA altogether. His name was Bob Peasy, and thankfully he retired this year. For better or for worse, I don't know the guy personally. I'm not dissing him or being mean, but I do feel like having a fresh face in there. He's being replaced by Bart Watson at the start of 2025. And my understanding is that Bart does recognize, this is what I've heard through the grapevine. Again, I've not met Bart, but that he does recognize the value homebrewers bring to the table. And hopefully he does more for us, as homebrewers than the prior CEO. And rumor has it, he's not going to follow that same path. We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I think it is worth noting that Bob Peasy is stepping down. So there is kind of a new, a chance for renewal, I guess, or a chance of newness to happen, something different to occur, when you get different leadership in. And I know they had a bunch of directors and things our board people step down as well. I can't remember the exact name for that. Sorry. So it's a lot of board members step down on both, the homebrew and the pro side. And so there is a lot of chance in there for something different to happen than what has been going on. And so that's something I'm really curious about, and it's something to look forward to in 2025 to go look at. I'm with you. I do like Julia Herz. I do think she's probably she is a very at least my interactions and my impressions of her has been she's a very sweet person and a very wonderful person. I just think she's kind of been handed the keys to this kind of a ship that's in very lackluster shape. Maybe not quite the USS Minnow yet, but well on its way to being on the bad end of a 3-hour tour. So I'm hoping that they can get that corrected and get that righted. I don't know if it's possible or not. Seeing as things go, maybe the AHA becomes, eventually goes away in its current form, and then it gets reinvigorated as a grassroots thing, something else. I have no idea. I just know that, the Homebrew Con GABF merger was a very, very fluid thing since it was announced, where the Homebrew HQ, first it was going to be one thing, and then it kind of devolved into something else, and then the Homebrew National Homebrew Competition was going to be announced on the GBF main stage, and then it kind of devolved into a side room karaoke stage kind of setting. And so there's a whole lot of kind of fluidity that's happened over the last year that's been very, very rough. And so I would hope that hopefully under this new leadership, this new team that's coming up, I'm hoping things are a little more transparent, a little more forward. And that's really just kind of my hope for the future.
Yeah, I think transparency is a big thing for the modern age. I think the younger generations of not just brewers, of people in general expect more transparency. I think we're more keen. I don't clump myself in with the youngest of the folks out there, but I think we're more aware that people do shady things behind closed doors, and we want to be able to see what's really going on. We want to hear the truth. We want to understand, what is it that is so negatively impacting the AHA. And to this day, we haven't really got that. And I think that's an issue. I think people start to make presumptions when that happens. And for people like me, I'm not looking at the why. I'm going, well, the fact that you're doing that, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And so I don't want to be affiliated with an organization that's not going to be upfront and honest, especially when I'm paying you to be a member of it. Right. Those are the issues that I have with it. Now, the last time we did an episode focused on the AHA, I believe it was in April of this year. And we actually did the follow-up one where we answered a bunch of people's questions and read their comments on that prior episode. It was before HomebrewCon 2024, which got relabeled Homebrew HQ. It was at GABF. And then I believe it was the week after GABF ended, I saw a Reddit post in the homebrewing subreddit where somebody asked hey, what was it like? How did it go? And, overwhelmingly, it seemed like people thought it was a flop. I mean, it just didn't work out the way that I think the AHA hoped it would, or maybe even expected that it would. Like you said, they kind of spun certain things as they're going to be this big thing, and it's going to be a focus. And then in the end, they ended up being, shoved to the side like baby in the corner. Right. And no, that's not a good look. It's not a good feel. Nobody wants to be a part of that. I didn't want to be a part of it. And it just bums me out because, for the sake of transparency, it's something that particularly for these Brews Views episodes, we really try to focus on. I feel like the AHA for a long time held rank as this organization that nobody could talk honestly about, or talk if that honest talk was in any way negative. And that is not transparent. That is not truthful. The fact of the matter is nothing is perfect. And for far too long, I just feel like people have kind of held, the AHA and the BA up on this pedestal. And now is a time for us to be critical of it so that the necessary changes can be made to improve this hobby. They've done great things for this hobby, but times are different. Things have changed. And you've got to be mindful of the people paying you money to be a member of this organization who don't feel like they're getting what it is, the value out of this, their membership dues. That certainly was the case for me. I feel like that was the case for you too, Will, right?
So I'm going to use a Harry Potter reference because you don't watch Harry Potter, and so it's kind of fun for me to do that. But one of the themes of Harry Potter is nobody says the name Voldemort. It's he who cannot be named. And it's like that for I don't know how many of the movies, pretty much all the way until the end where Voldemort is actively killing people. And the reality is that you have to name these problems out loud. If the reason HomebrewCon 2024 was fluid and was going to be at GBF HQ, then just come out and say, hey, we're struggling. This
Yeah.
current model isn't working for us. We're trying to do something to salvage it. Let's see what we can do to make this better. If you name it, it has less power over you. And I think as someone that works in that field of psychology, you can appreciate naming problems as being the first step to, trying to solve them.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've had a little bit of a Voldemort situation where we just need to be able to name what it is instead of having it just be this mystic thing behind whatever, but I guess that goes back to lots of Old English, because I guess the name bear actually came from the Old English name of what they would say instead of the actual name of a bear, because they feared that if they actually said the name of a bear, it would appear. And so we don't actually know what they used to call a bear. We just know that the name bear is what they would call it instead of that name.
Yeah, that's good. I have actually seen every Harry Potter movie. I watched it with my family prior to going to Universal Studios a couple years ago, and I enjoyed it far more than I thought I would. It's Lord of the Rings that I can't make it through the first hour without falling asleep.
Like Sauron and the Tower and the Big Eye. We'll talk about that.
Well, I think the point you make is a good one, right? That you don't speak the name Voldemort. You don't speak about the AHA in a way that's critical, because that's just you just don't do it. But you know what? It's time to do that. They're clearly not what they used to be, and there are reasons for that, and it's okay to be honest about that. And in no way are we attempting to burn them or shit on them in any way. We're talking about our honest experiences and what I've seen over the last 10 plus years of being involved in the homebrewing world. It is not the same, and it's not working out. Be open with your membership about that. Let us know why. Let us know what you need, right? Let us be a part of making the decisions that are going to potentially at least change what the AHA is. Unfortunately, I'm not sure they can right the ship at this point. My understanding is that they have yet to lock in a spot for HomebrewCon 2025, as much as they talked about wanting to be able to do that. And considering all of the logistics that go into event planning and such, it's likely that there's just not going to be a HomebrewCon in 2025, the same way there wasn't in 2024. Maybe they'll do another Homebrew HQ at GABF, but from what I've heard, not only about the flop that was the Homebrew HQ this year, but about the impact that the GABF has taken overall, just because of the change of the industry and the impact that all of all the negative stuff that's going on in beer in general. Who knows if they'd even do that? So I don't know. I don't have an insider look when it comes to the AHA. They do play their cards very close to their chest. I do think some of what they're doing is still very valuable. They just released recently their survey results, which more or less mirror what our survey, our general homebrewer survey results show about homebrewers. And I think that's interesting. Just another data point. But yeah, what I believe it was you who shared with the group, Will, about the statement somewhere on an AHA article that they don't have a place for HomebrewCon 2025, right?
So HomebrewCon 2025, you in our notes, which you so tirelessly prepare, and I'm appreciative of it, just says to discuss. And my main note here is to say we don't really have anything to discuss because we don't know anything about it. The only thing I've seen is the National Homebrew Competition sent out an email, because they are going to continue on. So good on all those people running that competition, because they are going on, and they admitted that they traditionally would announce the winners at HomebrewCon, but since there is an absence of any information on HomebrewCon 2025, they are trying to be a work in progress on how and when and where those things will get announced. And so my note here is to say that we don't. While you told me to discuss, I have very little to discuss on this topic, because there's not much available, and anything that I project out there will just be wrong and fluid and untrue.
Yeah, I'm with you. All we know so far is what's been written, and that's it. They haven't secured a spot for it, so who knows where it's going to go. But on that note, since we first brought up the idea of hosting an annual Brülosophy centered event, now, as an aside, that wasn't like a serious, it was halfway serious, I guess. We were curious to hear what people thought, but we have not done any planning or anything. But since we brought that up in a prior episode, we have heard from a ton of people who not only want it to happen, but they think it's actually doable and want to contribute to helping to make it happen. I mean, we're talking folks with experience in event planning and stuff like that. Truthfully, my biggest hang up on that idea is that I just don't have the time to organize and plan such an event. But I guess if we could build a team of people to do it in a way that works, and by which I mean it offers attendees something awesome while not putting us in debt, then fuck it, I'm open to it, I guess. I mean, that was another thing. Trevor from the Brew Club hit me up about. His wife is an event planner, and they've been talking about how they might be able to, contribute to making like a Brülosophy conference a thing. Who knows? To me, when I even just saying it, it feels like kind of grandiose. Like, oh, we're going to attract people to a conference that put on by, but apparently it's a possibility.
So, apparently it was quite the topic at his wife's Christmas party between him and her coworkers about how they could make this happen. So, I feel like lots of great things have happened after a few drinks at a Christmas party for work. So, and horrible things have happened too, but good things can happen. So I have a lot of confidence.
All those pictures of that were Xerox of your ass or something hanging on the wall.
Oh yeah.
That's horrible stuff that happens, right?
Yes, the late 80s, early 90s versions was the Xeroxed posterior. That was it. But this one could be a real thing. And so I think that's kind of a good idea. I think there are probably quite a few grassroots kind of places out there that are capable to fill in some of these gaps that have kind of been created as of late. I think from a competition kind of standpoint, I know National Homebrew competition is still going strong, but I know the MHP is out there, Master Homebrewers program that's very competition centric, very active, and very into that realm that can kind of help fill in some of those gaps and do that. And then I think we are I think Brülosophy has a wealth of information out there and a wealth of things to provide. And while some of it is kind of, again, things to continue to be proved and disproved, there's a lot to discuss and talk about, and at least give us an excuse to get together with like-minded people and have a few beers, which is kind of more what I'm into. If we can make it a spot where we go to some place that's very interesting, and get to go hang out with like-minded people and converse with them, and then maybe do a little bit of karaoke, then that's a win in my book.
Karaoke is an absolute must. That will happen. I was thinking about it just since Trevor emailed me a couple days ago, and like, what would the big differences be? Well, the obvious ones are we are a private business, a small business run by me and my wife, basically. She operates all the back end stuff. I put my voice on the podcast, basically. And, because of that, we don't charge a membership to people. We're not an organization. Our goal is not to necessarily, support members as much as it is to provide people with entertaining informational content. And that's it. So, any conference, or to me, I guess a better term would be like a meetup that we organize, would be qualitatively different than what HomebrewCon/NHC has ever been, because it is not something that is designed for members. It's something that would be designed for anybody who wants to go, right? It would be, the ideas that I've got in my mind about something like a Brülosophy conference really do stem from prior conversations. This was pre-COVID, that we had with our friends from Yakima Valley Hops when we were talking about a combined kind of party type event, a 3-day event. I still have all of those notes. Unfortunately, because of COVID, that stuff got pushed way into the back. And with all of the changes that have happened with Yakima Valley Hops and such over the years, I'm not sure that that's something that would necessarily be on the table at this point anymore, at least in the form that it was. But it could be something that we kind of steal from or borrow from, at least, in developing some sort of a meetup for people who are into Brülosophy. I don't know. I am definitely going to talk with Trevor about it. We need to hear from people. If this is something you really want us to do, you could probably tell by the tone of my voice, I'm a little bit skeptical to move forward with it. But again, for the sake of transparency, I want it to be out there. I want our listeners, our readers, our viewers to be a part of the decisions that we make, especially when it comes to big stuff like that. So let us know what you think, if that's something that you're interested in. Now, just to wrap up, considering everything the industry has gone through these last few years, I consider us quite fortunate to be in the position that we're in, producing pretty much the same content we have for years, minus the Brew Lab, of course, starting in 2025. Again, heartbreaking, but we're so happy for Cade. As redundant as it is, we do have our patrons to thank for all of this, as well as we do our sponsors who have stuck around. We're just so appreciative of all of that, and we're very lucky to have the support that we do. So that is certainly not lost on us.
100%. The sponsors, the patrons, even just the people that continue to click on the links and read the articles, watch the shows, listen to the podcast. We're so thankful for all of you. If there's one thing, this community that we are a part of, this community that we're in, is such a great community, and anything we can do to help build up and make this community better, and to help provide for this community, anything we can do is such a blessing that we can give to you guys. And so I'm so thankful for all of you.
Yeah, God, I couldn't agree more. And honestly, we are going to be here for whatever happens in homebrewing, for whatever happens to, the other outfits that are out there. We will be here doing the same thing that we do. It might be in different forms at different times. We might evolve a little bit. We're open to that, is what I want to say, is that we don't want to be, the old, tired, dudes who've been doing this for too long, and we just don't want to make the changes. We really genuinely want to see this hobby continue to flourish, get back to its former glory, and we're going to do whatever we can to contribute to that. So, well, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Brülosophy Show, at youtube.com/@The Show. That's the @ symbol followed by The Brülosophy Show. No umlaut needed. If you're listening to this podcast, we are absolutely confident you're going to love the videos that Martin's producing over on YouTube. Happy New Year from all of us at Brülosophy. We look forward to what 2025 has in store. Make sure to head to brülosophy.com to stay current on all of the fun beer and brewing stuff we are up to. The Brülosophy podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more. Life is good, the likelihood of me.
Hey, music fans, there are some great concerts headed this way. Don't miss out on all these shows in Atlanta. Gospel at Atlanta Symphony Hall. Gospel at Atlanta Symphony Hall. And Zach Brown Band at State Farm Arena. Tickets are going fast, so don't wait. Head to LiveNation.com to get your tickets now. That's LiveNation.com.